gents, here he is in real life, the man, the legend, Tiki Barber. It is it's an honor to be chatting with you here, Tiki. Man, you helped me so much with the book behind me, the Blood and Guts, telling old Jeremy Shockey stories, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I just feel like you are one of the all-time greats that we have to kind of keep thumping people over the head with that reality because it shouldn't get lost in time. It's unbelievable.
Look, running backs are disrespected now. I mean, think about how the old guys were disrespected. They never paid us any money, and they didn't appreciate it unless you were just, Jim Brown level. But I appreciate you, Tyler. It's good to be with you, dude.
You too. It's always great catching up with you. Whether we're talking about football back in the day or football now. But for everybody who doesn't know, I mean, you have every record that you can possibly have as a Giants running back,
except for one.
And also,
what's the one? Touchdowns. Brandon Jacobs has me by like 2, and it's only because there's at least a dozen times where I got caught on the 3-yard line, 2-yard line, and I'm just like I'm trying not to look at the sideline because as soon as I look at the sideline, I know I'm going to be told, "Get your ass over here," and here comes big ass 6'5". 250 Brandon Jacobs to smash in and grab the touchdown. I'm like, God. So he has me by 2, I think, touchdowns in our career. Other than that, I got most of the records.
I mean, 10,449 rushing yards, 5,183 receiving yards. Your 2005 season, at the time, the second most yards for anybody ever. 2,390, and it's so funny you bring up Jacobs. One of my best friends. He fell in love with the Giants because of you. Like right at the end, when for whatever reason Giant fans were getting pissed off at Tiki Barber. Just so you know, my buddy Zach Scott fell in love with the Giants.
I love it.
He goes. I texted him. I go, "Hey, what do you want me to ask Tiki?" And he goes, "You got to ask him about Brandon Jacobs stealing all of his touchdowns because that was just pissed me off."
It's so true, though. I wish it was like a facetious, like half joking. It's the truth, right? He had all his touchdowns because I didn't know how to score. And by the way, scoring is an art, right? There's a process to whether it's an extra 2 yards or whether it's breaking a 30-yarder. Right? There's an art to doing it, and I just never had it, right? I could score the easy ones, but I couldn't do the hard ones. LaDainian Tomlinson's the perfect example. I mean, that dude had like 89 touchdowns, or maybe more than that. He just knew how to get that extra whatever and get into the end zone. And it's why he's a Hall of Famer. And I'm second on the all-time touchdown list for the Giants. So, but I don't mind. I mean, it is what it is. I just take it out on BJ every now and then.
You have to. Where do you want to start? I think, a lot of folks probably don't really know your upbringing, Roanoke, Virginia, right? Raised by a single mom. Obviously, you and Rondé probably closer than we could ever imagine. But, what was your childhood really like for people who might not know?
Well, so, we grew up. My mom and dad were divorced when we were very young. And until recently, I mean in the last decade, I didn't have a relationship with my dad. Now we're very close. So it was just my mom, and she worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs on the weekends. And she always made it feel like we didn't need anything, even though we knew we weren't rich. We never felt like we needed anything. And that was mostly because of my mom. And I think the reason it worked is because I had a twin brother, right? If I was a single, only child, it would my mom it wouldn't have been as easy for her to deal with us. But we loved to be in each other's company when we were younger. We would never leave each other's sides, and so we always had each other's back. My mom even says we used to speak this other language, which I think was just mumbling, right? Saying words and mumbling, but we could understand what we were saying, and so it was the 3 of us. And then when we got a little bit older, we started playing some sports, and I was always fast. So when you're 10 to 8 to 10, if you're fast, you're going to be good at sports. And that's how we started. And then we started to grow into the things that we love, football and wrestling and track and field. which ultimately led to us, having good high school careers and going on to college, and then ultimately to the NFL. So it's a little bit more complicated than that. But I felt like my childhood was not one of like harsh lessons that turned me into the success that I was. You know what I mean? I always felt like I
Yeah,
was taken care of, and man, and a lot of that is because of my mom, who's amazing.
that's incredible. I'm sure you get asked this a million times, but like I'm talking to you here. You look like Rondé. You sound like Rondé. I got to think you screwed with people, especially in high
We
school and
never did,
college.
dude, because we were too
Really?
shy. We weren't unshy until we got into the NFL. And that was just because, I mean, you're in the NFL. Like, you finally got some money in your pocket and people care about you a little bit. But before that, if we didn't know you, we were not talking to you. We had our very close knit group of friends. And other than that, it was kind of like, all right, who the hell are you? Like, what are you doing here? Um, so we never played tricks because we just didn't. I don't think we felt confident doing it. Now, if we had the personalities that we have now back then, oh, forget it. It would have been out of control.
And so when not drafted in '97, you go 36th overall to the Giants. Obviously, Rondé goes 77th.
Yeah.
But just reading about both of you at that time, is it true how like he was kind of singularly focused with football, obsessed with football, and at a very early age, when you get to New York City, you're enamored with stuff beyond the field, right? I mean,
Well,
you're in Manhattan, you're in New York
well,
City. There's
I
more than
think
football going on.
it's so Rondé didn't play right away. And Rondé almost didn't make it. As crazy as that sounds, he's a Hall of
Yeah.
Famer now. But there was a point early in his career where you probably would have said he's not going to make it in the NFL in his first, 10, 12 games or something like that, even maybe going into his second season. But then he just figured it out because he had the right coaches. Tony Dungy was fantastic, obviously, but Mike Tomlin, these mentors who went on to great things in their respective coaching careers, helped Rondé evolve into a player who could contribute and then thrive. Monty Kiffin is the biggest one because he put Rondé in positions to be, I think, unique, right? Because he's a Hall of
Right,
Famer.
change the game. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He's a Hall of Famer, and it's not because he was the biggest and then had the most interceptions. It was because he did everything. He was uniquely defensive. And in fact, if you look at the linebacker slash corner position in the NFL, it is what it is now because of Rondé. Like, the reason that nickel is a base defense. Think about nickel, three defensive backs is a base, cornerbacks is a base defense now, to the point where they even have a nickel in the Pro Bowl. All of that is because of Rondé, because he could play linebacker. He'd have 100+ tackles. And so, to answer your question more directly, uh, Rondé was put in a position where he had to scramble to make it early, and so he became obsessed with it, and he never became unobsessed with it. Like, it was just everything was about making it, and even after he made it, he was still trying to make it right. And it's why he played for 16 years and helped them win a Super Bowl and did so many great things as a football player. I started right away. I was one of the very few giant rookies in their history up to that point that started on my very first opening day, and I was good for 4 or 5 games, and then I got hurt. I tore my PCL in my right knee, and my gait changed, my speed game changed. I missed 3 games, really didn't play for 6, and like I just turned into this different person, not someone that I recognized, and I didn't feel comfortable in my own body, and as a result, I started like wondering if this is what I wanted to do. Can I play this game as a 200-pound back? And I'm half hurt. So I start in my off seasons. I started doing other stuff, and it started at WFAN, working in the overnights with Joe Beningo in this little shitty basement in the bottom of this Queens studio. And I ultimately turned it into a media career that just kept growing and growing and growing because I started to get better and better and better as a giant, right? And when you're in New York and you're a successful athlete, you can literally do whatever you want, right? You can get away with murder, that type of thing. But also, the opportunities just can come to your doorstep, and I've never been one to turn away from an opportunity. And so I grew these two as I call them, these parallel paths, right? One is a football player who was trending towards the all-time leading rusher that you were talking about, but also this other media career that just had a lot of interest in to me. I met so many different and diverse people in the media world that it made my jumping off point that when I retired really really easy. Right, so many guys that get to the end of their careers on their respective fields, and they're just like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. Maybe that's changed a little bit now because of how how they develop brands, but in my day, like you didn't know what you were going to do if you spent a decade playing football. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, probably 4 or 5 years into my NFL career.
And that was so different for your time. And maybe a reason, at least, 05, 06. So was it like 5 games into your last year? You said, look, this is my last year because, you don't want to beat the hell out of your body. You have other interests. You're charismatic. You're thinking ahead in a way players really weren't then. And I think like Giant fans didn't really know how to wrap their minds around it. Like, no, you're going to play until we say you can't play anymore.
Well, as a fan, you do take ownership of the players on your teams. You love them. You want them to play forever. You want them to, help you win a championship. And at that time, you're right. It was like 4 or 5 games into my last season. I just knew I didn't want to do it anymore. I still knew I was going to be good, and I had a really good last season, but the grind had wore on me, and my body felt terrible. I didn't want to get beat up anymore, and it led me to really and truly pursue a media career. At the time, I was working for Fox News on my off days, so I'd go in the mornings. I'd do Fox and Friends. Sometimes they'd have me do other shows, and I started to develop this reputation as this diverse. I don't want to call it a Renaissance man because I didn't do enough to be called that, but I was doing so many different things. It felt like, oh, Tiki can do anything, and so I wanted to take advantage of that because I didn't want to get beat up anymore, and I did, and I jumped when the iron was hot, went to the Today Show, and had a pretty fun 3 or 4 years there before ultimately. I came over to CBS and have been here for a decade plus now.
Do you regret it? That we're so many years removed from then. Yeah. Obviously, knowing they won the Super Bowl the next year.
Oh, you know what? Tyler, I didn't think they were close to winning a Super Bowl. I didn't think the Giants were anywhere near winning a Super Bowl. Like, it's revisionist history to say it was inevitable, but it wasn't. Right? Tom Coughlin almost got fired in 07. Or 06, I should say, the 06 season leading into the 07 season. Right? That was a real thing. And if he hadn't changed some of his ways of treating the players, he would have been. And because he did, and you gotta respect him for it, because now he's a Hall of Fame head coach. Those guys responded and they played their ass off for him. He went from being heavily disliked, to being someone that these guys loved. And that's a credit to Coach Coughlin. But at the time, I didn't think that was going to happen, and nor did I want to be a part of it because I didn't want to get beat up anymore. Right? The running back has changed in today's NFL. Right? Maybe they get 60% of the touches, except for Christian McCaffrey, who never leaves the field. Right? There's a guy that does this. There's another guy that does this. There's another guy that does that. I did everything other than score touchdowns. Right? I did everything. I'd have 400 plus touches a year, and I struggled to keep it 205. I just didn't want to do it anymore. And so people always ask me, do you regret leaving? Timing's a bitch is my response. Right? I could have stayed another year, or we could have won the year that I left. I don't know. It didn't go into my calculation. What I cared about was feeling fulfilled in what I was doing professionally. And at that point, it wasn't football anymore. So I don't regret it because I didn't want to do it. Right? You know how much work it takes to be an NFL, to be an NFL player and to do well at it. It's a grind, man. And
especially when you got Joe Carini in there, right? Yeah, you're with the strong man.
Exactly. He's throwing 600 pounds on my back and saying, "Go squat and take a walk." Like all these, it's crazy.
No thanks. No, give me a drink.
I loved it until I didn't. You know what I mean?
That's amazing. You know that God. I mean, Jeremy Shockey. Those stories had me cracking up.
Yeah,
For more reasons than one. But I think was it Brandon Short was telling me the story how like he just called Tom Coughlin an asshole right to the press, right in the
yeah,
papers.
right.
The next day they're like, Jeremy, like why you call the head coach an asshole? He goes, oh, it's a free country, freedom
Exactly.
speech, just kept
Because I
walking.
can. Because
But
I can.
it was, I mean,
That's,
he was old school, and you
he
guys went
was.
at it, right? Very, very publicly. You and Tom Coughlin. What was
Yeah,
it
of
really
course.
like, before
Well,
he kind
you
of
know
had
what?
this
Well,
change?
I think it's the idea of I'm respecting you. You also have to respect me, and especially because I'm not a kid. I'm not 21 years old. I'm 30 years old or 29 years old when he got there. Actually, I think I was 28 when he. I'm 28 years old. I've been busting my ass trying to make this Giants franchise relevant and good. Yes, we went to a Super Bowl. That was 5 years ago, but I'm still all in here, right? I give every ounce of myself to this team, to this organization, to my teammates. And he was trying to weed out guys who didn't buy in. And maybe that works in college. Maybe that worked in a startup. I call it a startup, the expansion, Jacksonville Jaguars. To me, it didn't fly with the Giants. But again, to his credit, and I respect the hell out of him, he changed and he won 2 Super Bowls because of it.
Yeah, and it's weird if you're not there because outside looking in, right? You had your three best seasons at
Yeah.
the end
Oh yeah.
there. I mean,
No,
and
I give him credit. I give him a lot of credit for turning me into the player that was a three-time, Pro Bowler, a two-time All-Pro. It was a lot because of him and his coaching staff. Gerald Ingram, who doesn't get enough mention, who was my running back coach, really changed my career, both by getting me to focus on being strong in the right places so that I was durable to take a pounding that I was taking, but also how to stop putting the ball on the turf and
right.
changing mechanically how I carried the football. Right? It's everything is physics, man. Like science rules our world. Whether it's you want to talk about the how particles interact with one another, but also how leverage matters in a game. He taught me that, and it changed the trajectory of my latter part of my career.
I remember thinking how wild that was in real time. I think he had what like 12 lost fumbles in 2 years, and then
Yeah,
almost nothing after that.
yeah,
It just was kind of holding the ball up. I can
yeah,
picture you now in some of those classic games, just kind of
yeah.
holding it tighter to your chest, even if
I
you
had
feel like you're in the open field and you might be able to pump those arms, just
I
being
know.
safe with it.
I feel like I had 59 career fumbles. Maybe that's heavy. I can't remember what the number was, but at the end it was only like 5 in the last 3 years.
Yeah,
So it
it's
just it,
crazy.
it just changed how I carried the football and my attention to detail. And honestly, the biggest thing that I still take from Coach Coughlin is that the details matter, right? The little things matter. The big things that everybody sees and talks about, I mean, it's interesting and it's low hanging fruit, but the details are what matter. The details are what make you great at what you do.
Which those details might just piss you off from time to time. I get it. The Coughlin time, he probably had some idiosyncrasies that we can't even wrap our minds
Yeah.
around.
Yeah, he taught us how to put our socks on so we didn't get blisters. I tell people that all the time. They
Really?
don't believe. Yeah, we had a meeting about how to put our socks on so that we didn't get blisters. That was the detail that he went into.
How do you how do you endure a meeting like that as a
Uh,
30-something-year-old?
I mean, you kind of need to listen because he's not wrong. Because we were having a lot of blisters, and it's
Oh,
stupid.
really?
It's stupid and simple things. Like that little line on your sock, right? It's a reason that it's there and not like on the bottom of your foot. Because if it's on the bottom of your foot, then you're gonna hit if you hit it the wrong way and your feet get sweaty and it's now irritating your foot, then you're gonna develop a blister, right? And so, or if you say you're wearing yeah, like the back heel of the sock, right? There's a little pocket in there, and it's there for a
Yeah.
reason, so that it doesn't slide, like your foot doesn't slide around. Like so, if there's like laxity in that little socket in the back of your shoe, and your shoe is tied too loose, and you're going to get a blister, right? So it sounds so stupid, but it actually was relevant.
That's amazing. I feel like you'd be a great middle-aged man life coach. Like I
That's
need
right.
like a hologram of Tom Coughlin. Just
Uh,
all right, you're washed up, Tyler, but here's how you're going to get through the day
that's
without any
right.
injuries here.
That's right. He's gonna all the little things you're gonna do right. Now you might not do the big things good enough, but all the little things you're gonna do right. That's exactly
You
who he
guys,
was.
and you had a lot of meetings. I mean, I love when you called him out after the Jacksonville game that last year where you weren't getting the ball. You were right. You're
But it
right,
wasn't
and
him.
you
It
probably.
wasn't even him. I wasn't even talking about him. I was talking about our offensive coordinator, Coach
Oh
Huffnagel.
yeah, well, he wouldn't have been calling the plays.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was Huff, and like I loved Huff. We had trouble communicating with him because he was deaf in one of his ears, and so the things that we would try to translate just wouldn't register. And so in
Really?
that Jacksonville game, we threw the ball. I want to say like 40 something times. We had, I don't know, 10 carries, and at the time we were one of the top rushing teams in football. And it was like, well, what the hell are we doing? Like we know what we're good at. Why are we not doing that? And Coach Coughlin had to reassign Coach Huffnagel, and Kevin Gilbride took over as the offensive coordinator. And Kevin Gilbride helped them win 2 championships. So it worked out, but it was what the team wanted, and nobody would say it. So I said it.
I mean, time and time again, you're saying things that probably so many people were thinking,
Mm-hmm.
in that room, and
Yeah.
you know, you you won't say it. You probably deserve a ring as much as anybody for kind of speaking
Oh, I
some of
wasn't
these
there.
things into existence.
I was not there, and I did not want to go through the grind. So no, I don't. But I feel like I left the Giants better than when I got there, and
Yeah,
that's what matters. Um, and that's what I hope my legacy in that organization is.
I mean there's so many iconic plays, games, but the one that jumps out here, I don't know if it does for you at the top of the list. That just a couple days after Wellington passes, and you
Yeah,
go for 200 playoff
that's the
game,
only thing I remember.
playoff berth at stake.
The details of that game are the only one I remember fully. Like a lot of the games, I know I had like a play or two. Um, the only one I really fully remember from start to finish, like what the morning was like, what the locker room was like, what the national anthem, Katie Maris sang it, was like, what the fan emotion felt like. I remember that one from start to finish, and I'll never forget it because of how it all went down. I mean, obviously, it was because we were playing our rival, the then Redskins, and that week was so emotional with him passing away on a Tuesday and then being laid to rest on a Friday. And John Mara gave this amazing eulogy at his service at St. Patrick's Cathedral, and we all went as a team. Like we took the buses and we went out, and we came back and we practiced, and it just I don't know, it just like I felt empty, to be honest with you, for a lot of that week because I was there on Tuesday when he right before he passed. It was our off day, and they kind of knew. And the Mara family asked me to come visit. And Shockey was the other player that they asked to come out. He was Wellington's favorite player, and I got to say goodbye to him. Most of the other players didn't. Maybe they didn't have the relationship that I did with the Mara family and with Wellington, but I got a chance to say goodbye to them, and I'll never, ever, ever forget that. And then that Sunday comes around, and it's the perfect day, right? It was gorgeous, gorgeous day, and the first play of the game, we just split it perfectly. Now, part of it was Sean Taylor took a stupid angle to try to cut off the edge, but he ran underneath the block, and it's opened up the sideline for me, and I busted it out and got caught because I'm old at this point. And that happened a couple of times, but I finally scored a touchdown, and I gave the ball to Timmy McDonald, his grandson, and who's a close friend and still a close friend. Was one of our ball boys, and told him, "This is for you and your family and your grandfather. I thank you for making me a Giant." And then I took myself out of that game. That was my 206th yard and a touchdown. Yeah, it's one I'll never forget.
How do you process the emotions the way you're in the room, you're with the family, you're saying
Yeah,
goodbye. That
yeah,
that Tuesday, I mean, it can go it can go to
Yeah.
any extreme, really. I mean, you could be a total emotional wreck, unable to play, and
Yeah.
you have to win that game to get into the playoffs. It's a huge game.
Yeah,
Um,
this one was earlier. Yeah, it was earlier in the season, but it
oh,
became
that's right. Okay,
it became one that mattered. Um,
yeah,
so just for context, we knew at the beginning of the season that both of our owners were sick. Wellington had melanoma, and had been in and out of the hospital. Bob Tish, our other owner, had a brain tumor, and I know he had traveled multiple times down to North Carolina. I think he was going to Duke, trying to find some cure. And I had even closer relationship with Bob Tish than I did with Wellington, because Bob lived in the city and I lived on the Upper East Side. He lived in the Regency on Park Avenue. And so I would do a lot of things with him. Go to dinner with him. I'd go to, he had a jazz club, Feinstein's, in the Regency. We'd go to political events together. I spent a lot of time with Bob, and we knew at the beginning of the season that they were both sick. And Tom Coughlin told us, we are the team of record. Maybe some guys didn't know what that meant, but he said, we are the team of record for both of our owners. And I took that to heart. And it's why, I mean, it's not an accident that I had 1,823 yards that year rushing, and then 500 something receiving. And I rushed for 200 yards 3 times, including the game that you're thinking about, which is the Oakland game, which was on uh, New Year's Eve, I think. I think it was New Year's Eve, whatever it was. And uh, like that season meant more to me than any football season in the history of my life, because of what those two men, Wellington and Bob, meant to me. And I wasn't taking it lightly. And to be honest with you, I almost retired after that year because like something was gone. If that makes any sense, right?
yeah.
There was a connection that I didn't feel was still there. And I'm close to John Mara, but I didn't. It's not the same kind of relationship that I had with Wellington. I'm close to John and Steve Tish, but it's not nearly the type of relationship that I had with their father. And so I don't know. It felt like it was time for me to leave. But I stayed another year until, as we talked about before, that fifth game when I was like, dude, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. Um, but that year was special. '05 was real special for me.
What do you think just made you different as a back when the ball was in your hands? What made Tiki
Um,
Barber different than anybody
Honestly,
else?
Tyler. I knew I was smarter than everybody else, right? I knew that I was working harder. I knew that I was studying things that you weren't studying, or the defense wasn't studying. So I knew what they were trying to do to me, and so I could take advantage of it. I wasn't at that point. I wasn't fast. I was strong, but I wasn't Brandon Jacobs powerful, but I was a slasher, right? If you just, what was my running style? I would slash. And so I'd set you up and then I'd cut across your face. And even if you thought you had me dead to rights, I knew you weren't making an arm tackle, right? Because I could run through the arm tackle. And so as I got older, I just got really smart and patient. And I understood what those five guys in front of me were trying to do on every single play, right? It wasn't like, oh, I think he's supposed to go here. I'm just gonna find the hole. Like I knew exactly where it was supposed to open. And those guys up front, they were so smart. They don't get enough credit. Maybe O'Hara does because he's in media now and they talk about him. But Kareem
Yeah.
McKenzie and Snee and Soyberg and David Deal and even Luke Pettigrew, who was there as well. Like they don't get enough credit for how smart they were as an offensive line. They were all really good athletes, but they were smart. Like they didn't fuck up. They didn't screw up. And the reason that I had the success I had was because of those guys. And you know that that's true because the next year after I retired in '06, after the '06 season, the '07 season had almost the exact number of rushing yards, right? It was three guys. It was Brandon and Derek Ward and um, um, why am I forgetting
Mod
his name?
Bradshaw?
Yeah, Mod Bradshaw, Earth, Wind, and Fire, right? It was that O line was phenomenal, right? So I reaped the benefits of a great cohesion with five guys in front of me.
and then you enter, your post NFL life, and you had options. I want to say Fox had a big
Mm-hmm.
offer on the table,
Yeah.
like 4 years, 3.3 million a year they were throwing
Yeah.
around.
It was
Then
a big deal.
NBC,
Yeah.
yeah, like
Fox was exciting to think about, but at that time I had very young kids. AJ was 5, I think. Oh 07. Yeah, AJ was 5 and Chasen was 3. And I didn't want to be on the West Coast every weekend doing Fox. I didn't want to travel every weekend with young kids at home. And the Today Show is the Today Show, right? It's the greatest morning television show maybe in the history of morning television shows. And I had an opportunity to work for them. Not just the Football Night in America, which was nascent and new, and it didn't work out there because they didn't have an idea of what they wanted. It was 3 of us. It was me, Jerome Bettis, and Chris Collinsworth all in this little room, and like collectively we could talk for 3 minutes, right? But it was too much. It wasn't enough airtime for all of us. But I did some great stories for the Today Show, and I did some things that I don't think I would have thought about if I hadn't, including going shark diving in Hansby, South Africa, or visiting a shanty town, or doing a story on all the ballparks in Major League Baseball, like things that I just had a passion for, but didn't know I did until I actually did it.
and when you were able to talk sports, I love the honesty, man. It was refreshing. It might get you in the crosshairs from time to time.
You know what? But you
Uh,
have to. You
yeah,
have to speak the
people
truth,
people
right?
want you to be real, right?
Well, I think it's changed now. Like former athletes used to never criticize anybody ever, ever. Now they do it all the time. You look at Charles Barkley. Hell, he's in trouble with you know every current athlete in the NBA. But at the time, like saying something that was an opinion, which is what you're hired to do, felt unpopular. It felt villain. I felt like you were betraying something. And I just tell it like it is, not with malice, but just facts, right? I speak very factually. If you listen to my radio show, that's how I am, right? I have fun. I don't take myself seriously. I don't necessarily have to be right. But I'm going to tell you the facts as I see them.
Completely. I think that's maybe I spend a lot of time complaining about like the state of media and sports media a lot, but I guess that's one good thing going is you can be yourself and
Yeah.
build an audience
Right.
because anybody can build anything. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do here out
Yeah.
in the independent world. But out there in New York radio, people probably love listening to you because they know that you're not gonna feed them
Right.
chum bullshit.
Right.
And so,
Right.
if you were to say today, oh yeah, Eli Manning gave some really comical speeches, and we heard it within the context in which you say it, it's
You're right.
probably like we probably laugh with you, and like
Well,
yeah,
well,
he
now because
probably was pretty dorky in that
because
segment.
by the way, now you know Eli. Now people
Yeah,
know what I'm talking about, right? He had this persona of being this just like I'm not gonna say anything. I'm just gonna stay here and stuff. But he was funny as hell, dude, and he was awesome. And so when I talked about like him leading in this comical way, only thing you hear was he's comical. That's not what I
yeah,
was talking about, right? I'm talking about him being relatable. He's a Manning for Christ's sakes, right? He's NFL royalty. You expect him to be like this buttoned up whatever, but now removed from that, you see first how Peyton is, you see how Cooper is now, and Eli is just he's the third one, right? Or yeah, he's the youngest one. So they're all the same, right? They have these amazing sense of humors that until you see it and know it, you don't you think they're the Mannings, right? They're just people, man, and they like to have fun, and it's awesome.
it's so true. Yeah, we like he kind of leans into that
Yeah,
dorky persona now to
yeah,
the extreme. What
yeah.
kind of stuff was he doing behind the scenes that was hilarious?
All kinds of. So the funniest story ever. So we used to like ball up our tape, like tape your ankles, tape your wrists, and you ball it up. And we all think we're basketball players, so you just like shoot them across the. They have these massive trash cans, that are just in corners and stuff. And Eli's locker was, and so we would do this, but you had to like look around, right? Because if you didn't, your shit was getting smacked, like just like right back in your grill. and there's nobody watching, so it doesn't matter. But it's just funny, right? And so one day, Eli's, I think he's a rookie. Yeah, he definitely was a rookie. It was an 04. He had just started playing. I think it was, I don't know what week it was. Um, and I'm looking around, I give him a shit, and I shoot this shot, and Eli comes flying. He's butt naked. He just comes flying and just knocks it out of the way. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? But that was him. Like, it was out of nowhere because it was out of character for him, at least in my mind. So, but he, guys love him because he's
Yeah.
real, he's funny, and he performed. Right at the end of the day, he knew how to get better every year, and it wasn't a surprise that he won 2 Super Bowls, and when it mattered most, made the most important plays in recent Giant history.
And I feel like now, like your place in team history, people are gaining this appreciation for you. They love hearing you talk about the team, and
Mhm.
time heals. But was it weird at the? I want to say, was it the Ring of Honor when you're getting introduced and fans are booing you? I mean, it's
Yeah,
not like you were arrested. It's not like you were
no,
a
I
cancer
mean,
in the
I,
locker room. Like you didn't
I
do anything
yeah,
illegal.
I didn't. I never. I mean, I guess I understand it because that's just the emotion of Giant fans. But media wasn't the same then, right? It wasn't like the story couldn't be told except by people who wrote it in on the the Post or the Daily News or even the New York Times, right? So the only way the story was told or explained was by a third party, right? And so my side, in which I never really even cared to tell people about, I knew in time it would work itself out, and more importantly, I knew in real time that uh, Eli and I weren't in a bad spot. Like it was presented as like it's Tiki versus Eli. They hate each other. It's like no, we don't. Like what? But how do you tell that story? You can't. Um, I was at a tournament this past weekend for Derek Jeter, and it's the 20th anniversary of of um, of the Players Tribune, and no, maybe it's the tenth anniversary of the Players Tribune, and they were talking about it, and I was like, man, only thing I'm mad about with Derek is that I should have thought of this, right? Giving voice to the athlete, right, in their own way to tell their story or tell whatever they want to get out. That's what the Players Tribune was doing, but that came around in 2013, right? In 2006, 7, it was just you were subject to who was ever going to tell the story, and it wasn't you. Now you can tell your own story, which it just changes the landscape in so many ways. Athletes are very intelligent, and even if they're not book smart, there's a savvy that you have. There's an understanding that a lot of us have that lets you, I don't know, communicate your story the right way instead of having to go through a third party.
And you were kind of in a darker time then. There was because you tried the comeback right 4 years after
Yeah,
you
that was like
retired, but
4 years. Yeah, that was like 4 years after that. It was right before the I think it was a lockout. It wasn't a yeah, it was a
right.
lockout. Right before the lockout. I mean, it was dark because I was going through a divorce. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't working really, and I had a previous relationship with Steve Ross and do a business venture, and he was like, "Yeah, come try out." So I got back in shape and started working with Joe Carini again. I was strong and I felt great. And then the lockout happened. So I went on a visit to Miami. I worked out. I thought it went well, and then all of a sudden they can't talk to him anymore because the players are locked out, and so it just fizzled before it ever got started. But honestly, it was a blessing in disguise because a couple of things happened not too soon after that. One, I started my own company called Thusio, which was it's still around, and we just got acquired about 18 months ago by Triller. And I also started on CBS Sports Network, which is a brand new national network to cover the owned and affiliated. I think there's probably, I don't know, a couple hundred affiliated stations around the country for CBS Sports Radio at the time. Now we've subsequently been bought by Odyssey, but it led to the stepping stone that became my most recent tenure on WFAN. So it was it. I think I could have done it. I really do. Um, but I think ultimately I would have not enjoyed it. So I'm almost glad that I didn't make it back because the things I got involved with subsequently were much better for my health and much better for my professional career.
It's and if I think if we were to look at all of the retired athletes in the sport, you would be at the top of the list of like Tiki Barber is going to retire and be happy for the rest of his life. But
Yeah.
even you kind of worked through some
Oh yeah.
personal stuff. You've been open about it, depression, down, out. Like the Today Show didn't work out, and
Yeah.
you got out of it. Like how did you hit that brick wall, fall down, and kind of get back up to get to this
Well, I
place you're
mean,
at right
the biggest one, and I alluded to this earlier, was my father. And obviously my brother and my family and friends, they were always there. But when I sat down and was like a little bit lost, and then I got remarried to Tracy, who is amazing. She reached out to my father, and we knew we were going to have kids, and she wanted um, our kids to know all of their grandparents while they were still, if they could, if they were still alive. And fortunately for her and me, both my mom and dad and her mom and dad are still alive. And so she wanted my kids to meet all their grandparents. And so she reached out to my dad, unbeknownst to me, by the way. I didn't know. And like 2 months later, she told me, like, you're going to be upset with me. And I'm like, why? What'd you do? And she said, your dad's coming to visit. And by the way, I haven't talked to him in 15 years. I mean, I don't know. It'd been forever. Last time I talked to him, and it was for half a second, was at a Cowboy game my second year or something like that in the league. Um, and so I had never spent any real time with him since I was in seventh grade. So now all of a sudden he's coming, right? From Oklahoma.
What's going through your head at that point?
Um, I was very curious. I am a naturally curious person, and I knew it wouldn't be like it wouldn't be anger I knew that emotion was nowhere. I was just curious because I don't know him. You know what I mean? But he's my father. He was a star at Virginia Tech. He was roommates with Bruce Arians. Like he was the man back in the day. And then things got in the way, and his life went adrift, and he was lost a little bit. He got saved by an Indian, a Christian Indian. Her name is Addie. And it's still his wife, and she took him back to church, and they ultimately settled to Oklahoma because they went to Oral Roberts, and now he's the dean of the dean of practical theology and the head of field study out there at Oral Roberts University. And I would get these notes, random notes from people who would be like, "Oh, your father is amazing. He taught me so much about life and my walk with God." And I'm like, I have no idea who you're talking about until I did. And then he came, and I happened to have all of my kids that weekend. So I had AJ and Chasen and Ella and Riley, and we walk in the door, and my dad's sitting at the counter with my wife having a glass of wine. And I was like, all right, well, this is gonna be fun. And like 2 hours or 3 hours later, and a couple of bottles of wine, I heard the story, and I felt like, and my dad's kind of still a hippie. But it was awesome, and we developed this unbelievable bond that was heretofore gone. And when he left, I got a letter from my half sister Krista, who is like, she's a DA. She's an ass kicker, man. Like she's awesome, and it made me cry. Right? She had this note that basically was saying, um, I've wanted to write you this note. She's 35, I think now, 36. She's a little bit older. Maybe she's a little bit older than my wife, but she's basically said, I wanted to write this. I wanted to send you this note since I was 16 because I always wanted a brother, an older brother. And my dad always told us that, don't worry, eventually Tiki and Rondé will be in your life. Right? He always said that to her. Eventually, Tiki and Rondé will be in your life. And she wrote me this heartfelt like note that just, I don't know, it moved me. And I now gain not only back my father in my life, but also a half brother and a half sister who I've gotten close with over the last few years. So I mean, it's you get out of tough times by falling back on what's important. That's family.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah,
You never hear that happy ending in these situations. It's just the back to what you were in seventh grade about when he
yeah.
like left your life. I mean, was there a
No, no,
reason?
no,
Did
no.
he ask why? Or
No, he left our life when we were babies. We were baby.
oh,
We
your
were two.
baby.
They
Okay.
were divorced when we were two. But he came back when we were in seventh grade. I remember this. Like he came to a wrestling match. We were wrestling, and he was there. And we didn't remember, kind of know who he was. We got introduced. We spent some time with him, and then he was gone, and we didn't see him again until right when we graduated, right when we were about to leave college. He came to my last football game in college against Virginia Tech, last regular season football game against Virginia Tech, his alma mater. And, we said a quick hello, but I didn't have anything to say to him. So it's kind of like, I got to get on the bus. See you later. And then I saw him once in the NFL a couple years after that. And that was it. Right. And just, but I mean, it's interesting because the history doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter, right? History doesn't matter. What matters is now, and who he is now, and what his life is now, not what it was when I didn't know
So you weren't filled with rage and why and questioning
him.
him
No,
and
when I
pressing him
was
and
young,
interrogating him.
yeah, when I was younger, I was only because I saw how much my mom struggled. And I don't think I realized it until until I look back on it in retrospect, how hard it was on my mom that he wasn't there. Um, but my mom never made excuses. She never made any judgments against him or said negative things about him, even though I'm sure she could have. She didn't. And so it kept my interpretation of him clean, right? I had no biases towards him, regardless of what led him out of our lives. And I don't know. I see that as a very important lesson because so often we get influenced by the opinions of other people instead of making judgments on our own. And I have my mom to thank for that because of her not forcing a prejudice in my mind about my father. I have a great relationship with my father.
What a life lesson. So
Yeah,
years
yeah,
later,
right.
you seem to be at
It's
peace in
never
every
too late.
possible way.
Yeah, it's never too late, Tyler. Never. It never is. And so,
You keep
um,
in touch. You guys talk.
oh yeah, you know how we ended up really communicating after after that meeting was through Words with Friends. We played Words with Friends against each other and chat on that little chat that we used to have on Words with Friends. But I've been out there. I go out almost I'd say every 5 or 6 months. I end up having to be out in Oklahoma, and we see him, or he'll come here. He and Addie, his wife Addie, and him, they came about 5 months ago. So we see each other twice a year or so, which is great.
You said Indian as in Native American or like Indian,
Oh, from India.
the
Um,
country India. Yeah.
so, yeah, but she's Christian. There's a lot of Christian um, uh, Indians, not Hindu. Hindu's the predominant language, but there are some Christians, and it's because it was a colony. It was a British colony back in the colonialized days, and so Christianity is not huge in India, but it is there.
Well, Tiki, I could talk to you for hours, man. Can't thank you enough for carving out this
My,
much time. I'd be remiss though. Like the Giants this year, we hear you breaking the team down, but you save your
yeah,
best stuff for go long. Brian Dable, Joe Shane, Daniel Jones. We're all on board here, man. I think they made all
well,
the necessary changes. They cleansed the building. You've got competent, qualified people running the show, making really good decisions. But I mean, you know this organization from the top down as well as anybody. Where's
yeah.
this team going?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, they're still building. Let's put it that way. And as the season goes, I'll have to come back on and we'll get a real evaluation of this, Tyler. But they've made the right decisions to get the right kind of people into the organization. And I know people are clamoring about the Daniel Jones contract. As I say when we talk about Francisco Lindor or whoever has a huge contract, it's just money, right? What matters more is the leadership that guys like Daniel Jones will bring. He's the hardest worker. He's one of the smartest kids you'll ever be around. He's durable. At least last year he was durable, and he's dynamic, right? So I think they'll go as far as he grows. And another year in Mike Kafka and Brian Dable's system, you can't help but be excited for it. Now it's going to be hard because Dallas is supposed to be good. The Eagles are obviously defending NFC champs, and Washington, if they ever figure out their quarterback situation, have a hell of a defense. But um, coaching matters, and I know this because I have kids that are doing competitive cheer. I watch my kids competitive cheer. I watch them compete against other teams that don't have as good of coaching. You see it, and you see it when you watch the Giants. Coaching matters. That's why he was Coach of the Year.
You really do. And just to keep a good thing going, the people that were criticizing that contract, that you can't put a price on a
No,
full off season,
you're right.
year
And
two in the
by the
system.
way, it's really just a 2 year deal. Like people are up in arms. It's really a
Right.
2 year
It's
deal.
2 years.
That's all you got to think about. Think about
It's
the
not
two
going to
years.
stop you from hunting for quarterbacks.
The only thing that matters is the guaranteed money. It's truly the only thing that matters in the NFL. After that, you are expendable. Period.
Fans love you now when you're out on the town. Is it all love at this point, all these years later? And how should people remember
I'm I
the
am
great
a
Tiki Barber?
I have evolved into a trusted voice on one of the most powerful radio stations in New York, really in the country. And so, honestly, that's what people talk to me about. It's not about my career anymore. It's about my opinion on the Yankees and what I feel Cashman is doing, or the Mets with these young bats that they've started to bring up. It's always about my show now, right? Because that's how I'm publicly perceived. It's not as a football
We're
player.
a generation later now, really.
Yeah,
It's
no,
crazy.
that's right, Tyler. You're exactly right. I literally someone who was born when I retired is 16 right now, right?
Yeah,
So, so it's a different world. Like
it's nuts.
we've iterated, right? We're not talking about Tiki the football player. We're talking about Tiki the opinion maker on WFAN.
Yeah. Well, you do a hell of a job, man. I mean, I
Thank
try
you,
to
brother.
catch you on TV. Granted, I have an Ella myself in the sunny, and it's hard to detour off of Bluey, but
Yeah,
we
yeah.
try to make our way over as much as
I know
possible.
that world. You'll be out of it soon.
We're at 3.5 and 1.5, so we'll
Oh, no, you
see.
won't be out of it soon.
Hey, I can't thank you enough, Tiki. This was awesome. Appreciate all your time, and yeah, I mean, where do you want people to find you most? If they don't, if they for some reason they're not
Very
watching you
easy.
or listening to you, when and how should they?
Very easy. 10 to 2 on WFAN or the free Odyssey app. The free Odyssey app. You'll always find me there.
Beautiful. Hey, thanks so much. We'll hopefully talk soon, and you know,
Yeah,
text through
definitely,
this
Tyler.
crazy season.
Let's get together again once football is back in swing.
Absolutely.
Be good, Tyler.